Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. Operating rooms are cold on purpose, a kind of polished winter that keeps bacteria sluggish and surgeons sharp. You get used to it. You learn which vents will draft your wrists, which corners bite your ankles, how to tuck the bear hugger hose so it doesn't kink beneath the drapes. You learn your breath doesn't show under LED lights and laminar flow. That's how I knew the room was wrong. Before the case even started, my exhale hung in the air like a small cloud. Emergency trauma. Single GSW to the abdomen. Late 20s. Pale, with that mottled edge. Hypothermia paints on skin. Hypothermia kills trauma. The triad none of us want. Acidosis, hypothermia, coagulopathy, waits like a trapdoor. We fought it from the door. Warmed fluids. Room preheated on the panel. Forced air warming blanket inflated. Irrigation set to warm. The anesthetist clipped the temperature probe and gave me a number, 34.2 degrees C. Not great, but catchable. The minutes between sterile prep and first incision ran like a tightrope. When the surgeon opened, the core temp began to slide. 33.4, then 32.7. The anesthetist frowned, receded the esophageal probe, glanced at me. Try another new probe. Same number. The bear hugger's tone shifted from soft woof to a brittle whine like it was pushing uphill. I put my hands under the drape edge to check the warmth and felt something that wasn't there. A thin layer of cold, lying between skin and air. A shadow temperature at 31.1 degrees C. Our breath turned visible. Not just mine, everybody's. Little white ghosts blowing over blue masks. The surgeon paused with the retractor in his hand. Thermostat. 68. Gray's Fairy Green and Steady Facilities confirmed the log in real time. No deviation. Airflow stable. No alarms. Metal sweats when it meets cold. The Mayo stand fogged. The suction canister wore a faint frost necklace near its lid. The edges of a lap sponge stiffened where fluid kissed the air. The air moved differently across my cheeks inside the mask, as if the room had been lengthened by a few feet, and we were all standing in the extra part by mistake. We kept going because you do. Hemorrhage-controlled bowel-repaired warm saline. In blood products and calcium. Careful with potassium. Watch the acid base. Every warm thing we put in met an invisible mouth and came away less warm. The core temp hit 30.0, then 29.8, and stuck there like a bad idea. The anesthetist layered another blanket, slid another hose under the drapes, watched the number not move. When the lights flickered, I felt it in my teeth. Not a power crash, an electrical shiver. The stainless gleamed too bright for a second. A sharp blue line ran along the rail of the table like static making a choice, and the patient's skin looked as if someone held it up to winter. I tasted metal. The surgeon muttered, "Keep going." But his hands slowed the way you do when your body knows something your head refuses. We closed fast and clean, the way you do when speed is mercy. During the last throes of suture, the rhythm lost its shape. Then it lost itself. Asa stolen. We coated him with every good thing we know. Warm meds, compressions that would bruise any living chest, shocks when indicated, coaxing the number on the thermometer to blink up 1/10 of a degree like it might mean a way forward. The room gave us nothing back. Time of death was a sentence. I hated writing more in that moment than I usually do. I don't know why it felt personal. The room felt personal. The instant the zipper of the bag crossed his sternum, the cold left like it had only been renting the place. The fog above our masks disappeared. The stiff corner of a sponge softened. The bear hugger let out a long exhale and settled into its friendly purr. I checked the thermostat like a person who doesn't understand that a number can tell the truth and still be lying. 68-degree fairies, and this time it felt like it. Facilities arrived with laptops and wands. They ran their graphs and printed their proofs. The HVAC never budged. The sensors stayed true. They showed me a line as flat as a lake before dawn and reminded me the room was never below target. I nodded because people like us love data and hate stories. Then I went back in after they left and stood under the light, breathing slowly. watching nothing show up in the air and hearing that whine that still lived behind the bear hugger's normal sound. The way a stain can live beneath fresh paint. I thought about the ambulance bay, the minutes in the street before we saw him, the way cold climbs from the ground up when blood meets asphalt in winter, even when the calendar doesn't say winter. I thought about the breath that leaves a person and how maybe a room can hold on to it if the person doesn't. I thought about the cases we do in that suite and the ones that don't go home and whether a space has memory the way muscle does. Weeks later, we had another trauma in that this time a thoracotomy for a stab wound. I asked, half joking, if we could switch rooms. The schedule was locked. We couldn't. I pre-warmed everything twice, checked the vents with my own hand, asked facilities to give me a live readout in the corner. They humored me. The numbers stayed perfect, and so did the air. The patient made it. I told myself the other night had been a trick of adrenaline. I almost believed it until I bent to grab a dropped clamp from under the table and watched my breath bloom once. One soft cloud that vanished before I could name it. I don't tell new nurses this story because I want them to trust the systems that keep us from making old mistakes. I tell it to myself when I hear the bear hugger catch for a second on startup. When the wall thermometer shows me a loyal 68 and the hair along my wrists rises inside the gown. I whisper, "Stay to the warm air," like I'm talking to a dog that wants to bolt. And if I'm honest, when a body leaves that room and we close the bag, I listen for the sound the air makes coming back like a relieved house taking a breath after the guests go. Maintenance says the system never dropped. Maybe they're right. Maybe the cold wasn't in the air at all. Maybe it was in the space between a person and the world that was losing them inch by inch, and the room was kind enough or cruel enough to share. Some codes are loud. This one was quiet. The kind of quiet that lands after the monitors go flat and the gloves stop moving and everybody takes that breath they're not aware they're holding. We called time of death at 21:16. I wrote it down with a pen that always feels heavier after you use it for that line. He was 61, bowel resection for a stubborn obstruction. Good pre-op workup. No glaring red flags. He had joked about the ice chips, asked if he could have a cheeseburger afterward. Halfway through, a bleeder opened in the mesentery. A tucked-away vessel you don't see until it sees you. Suction snarled. Irrigation clouded red. The anesthetist called out pressures falling. Then there was rhythm. Then a bad rhythm. Then the pit of the world where the line goes straight and the room learns your name for the first time. Code. We worked hard and clean for 42 minutes. Compressions that counted. Epi on schedule. Calcium by Cararb. Shocks when they were indicated. The surgeon's voice steady on the beats. The anesthetist's face drawn with math and will. Nothing. Sometimes the heart turns its face to the wall. Sometimes no amount of knocking makes it turn back. We stopped. The room exhaled. The noise left like heat leaves a place where the door finally closes. I covered his chest, smoothed the drapes, and went for the eyelids out of habit. They floated. Open again like they always do if you don't hold them a second longer. I held them. They stayed. I told myself it was reflex when, as I taped a line down, his right hand flexed. Not a spasm. There's a language to spasm, and this wasn't it. This was a slow curl against gravity. Fingers talking to tendon like they had a plan. Artifact, the anesthetist said to the void because there were still leads on a chest that no longer belonged to alarms. The monitor was flat, stubbornly, and completely. We tagged him, zipped the bag halfway. Policy says wait for the bag. Keep the dignity intact, and moved him to holding so I could finish the documentation we all hate the most. The call from PACU sounded wrong before the words arrived. Voices do that when they've seen something they hate and can't stop seeing it. He's breathing. I ran. The gurney sat exactly where we'd left it. The monitor, someone had clipped it on, as a formality, now traced a weak sinus rhythm. He gasped. 3 jerks like a body surfacing out of cold water, and his eyes opened under the fluorescent ceiling. His mouth worked, and a raw whisper made a shape I never thought I'd hear from a body that had left. Not ready. The rhythm faltered like a frightened animal shivered and quit flatline again. We all stood there, the world loud with the silence after a thing like that. We called it again at 21:46 because the clock doesn't care if it's writing the same sentence twice. Someone said Lazarus phenomenon, and I said it too, because names are anchors, and we needed one. Delayed auto resuscitation. Air trapped in the chest. Releasing venous return changing drugs finally reaching the heart after compression stop. It happens rarely, but it does. What it doesn't explain is the way his lips shaped the same words when the light moved across them as we adjusted the bag. What it doesn't hold is the look of purpose in a hand flexing when it has no right to want anything. What it doesn't touch is the shift in the air I felt standing at the foot of the gurney. The small wind that moves through a room when the door, between here and somewhere else, cracks and closes again. His daughter came in the next morning. A woman with a careful voice and eyes that belonged to yesterday. She asked me if he said anything. I was supposed to say no. I told her yes, that he had spoken. I told her what he said. She took a long breath, the kind that fills a person from the feet up, and nodded like a choice had been made for her somewhere, far away. He always said death was a meeting you could be late to if you tried hard enough, she said. He was always late. She smiled without her mouth. He'll be on time now. I think about that hand. I think about the way we write a systole on, a form as if it's a period, not a comma that sometimes curves back on itself. We sent him to the morgue and I checked the holding room one more time before I left. The portable monitor that had read a clean flat line through a single ghosted blip, one tooth in a closed mouth and cleared. I told myself it was motion, a lead settling, a bed frame sighing. I told myself a lot of things that night. We clean the room after codes like we clean it after anything else. You sweep the floor, you crack the suction, you toss the sharps, you count, you close, you take the gloves off and your hands look the same as they did before. But sometimes when the overhead light swings just so, I see a reflection of a mouth moving where there is no face, and I hear a man whose heart had no rhythm tell me what every person on a table believes in their bones, even when they can't say it. Not ready. When the next code came months later, the team moved with the shitty that earns and breaks us. I did. The same things, but I let my eyes rest on the patient's hand a heartbeat longer. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe an apology from the universe. Maybe acknowledgement that sometimes we write the last line and someone else writes one more. When the monitor finally went quiet, I stood still, listening to the room the way you listen to a seashell for proof that there's still an ocean somewhere, even if you can't see it. There was nothing. I was grateful and a little disappointed. And that's a strange thing to feel after death, but it's honest. The chart asks for times. The family asks for words. The room asks for nothing. I give them all what they ask. And then I go home and lie awake long enough to hear my own heartbeat and wonder if it knows anything my head doesn't. If the day ever comes when I hear not ready again, I hope I have the mercy to answer even if the clock doesn't. I've always believed the safest sound in an operating room is the hush after induction. The way the body settles, the pulse evens out, the BIS drifts down like a curtain. That night, I learned a quiet room can still hold a scream. He was mid-40s ASA2 cooperative, the kind of patient who thanks you for the warm blanket and asks if you'll check on his wife in the waiting room. Laparoscopic colicky speaks to me. I clipped his pulse. Ox taped his IV and watched the anesthetist run. The meds propofol first milky white fentanyl, then sevoflurane flowing the mask, a gentle press over his face fluttered once, twice, and then rested. The monitor climbed to a steady 68 beats per minute. Blood pressure stable. BIS idled in the low 40s, good depth. Timeout was clean. Right patient, right procedure. Consent confirmed. We draped out the field, inflated the abdomen with CO2, and placed the first drawer. The surgeon worked calm and efficient the way he always did. I passed instruments without looking away from the monitors because I like numbers. Numbers don't lie in the O. 10 minutes in, the BIS hiccuped. A flicker at 38, then 61, then 72. I called it. The anesthetist adjusted vapor, checked the entitle SIBO, nudged the propol infusion. The BIS dipped to 58, then behaved until I heard. Had a thin sound beneath the suction, too formed to be a leak, too shaped to be air. Words that didn't belong where we were. Please stop. I thought it was the room playing tricks, but then his pupils moved under closed lids. Rapid tracking. Heart rate jumped into the high 90s and wouldn't come down. The entitled CO2 stayed normal. He was ventilating fine, the anesthetist muttered. Artifact, but his hand was already pushing another bolus, turning up the gas, checking the MAC on the vaporizer. The surgeon asked if everything was okay. We're fine, we said, because we wanted to be. I leaned closer to the drapes. The airway tubing hummed with each machine breath. The cautery popped, the suction hissed, and beneath it came a second thread of sound. The kind a throat makes when it shouldn't be able to make anything. I can feel it. His lashes trembled. The pulse pressure widened with every stroke. He wasn't moving, but he was fighting us the only way he could by rising. Rise in heart rate, rise in pressure, rise in panic on a monitor that didn't know how to spell fear, but could measure it millisecond by millisecond. We flooded him. More Propal, more Cybo, a careful dose of midazolam. The BIS skittered at 68, then 62, then finally slid under 50. The heart rate drifted lower. The surgeon kept working, voice steady, almost done. We pretended we hadn't heard anything. Closure was routine. We reversed, extubated, transferred. As soon as he hit Paku, he began to cry. Not the groggy tears you see when anesthesia wears off. This came from someplace deeper. He clutched at the oxygen mask with shaking hands, pulled it aside and got the words out between jerks of breath. I was awake. I told him that wasn't possible, that we had monitors that we adjusted when we saw changes. He looked straight through me and said, "Calm and ruined, I couldn't move. I heard you talking about your weekend. I smelled burning. Something pushed into me here." He tapped under his ribs and it felt like pressure and then it felt like a hot wire. He shut his eyes. "You said, 'Can we get coffee after this?' I had said that. I had whispered it to the scrub tech without thinking because it was late, and the list was long and we were trying to stay human. He had heard it while his body was a table we were working on. He had been held down by drugs meant to erase the world, and the world had kept going without him. The anesthetist came over quiet. We explained awareness as gently as we could. Rare, awful, the kind of event you read about in audits and hope you never meet. We told him he'd be seen by psych, that nightmares were common, that he should write down everything he remembered. He nodded like a man who'd been found in a snowstorm and told the frostbite would hurt worse when his fingers thawed. I went home and lay awake, hearing the sound a whisper makes when it fights machines. After that case, I changed how I listened. The BIS was no longer a number, it was a siren. The blood pressure cuff could shout. The tremble at the corner of a lid meant, "I'm here, don't leave me." I started narrating to the drapes in a low voice. "We're giving more medicine. You're safe. We hear you. Not because the policy requires it, but because something in me hopes the words can reach under the drugs and knock on whatever door we sometimes fail to close." We saw him months later in clinic. He looked better but stepped sideways when a cart rattled by. He asked if we still play music in the O. We said sometimes. He said, "I hope you turn it off if anyone else starts to wake up." We promised we would. He left and I stood in the hallway, hands empty, feeling like I'd been handed something I couldn't carry or put down. I used to believe awareness was a statistic you counseled away with percentages and protocols. Now I know it's a story told, in present tense by a voice that shouldn't exist. Now when the room falls perfectly quiet and the gas hums soft and everything looks safe, I lean in like I'm listening at the edge of a frozen lake. Because even in deep winter, sometimes you can hear the water moving under the ice. Please stop. I still hear it and I still answer out loud even if no one else does. In surgery, we live by checklists. They're not suggestions. They're scripture. Consent, site marking, timeout, every line double read, every signature verified. Because one wrong mark can ruin a life or end one. That night, everything started, by the book, right-sided femoral bypass graft. Middle-aged male, diabetic, smoker, friendly, in the pre-op bay. He joked that he'd drawn an arrow on his own leg at home just in case. The surgeon smiled, used the permanent marker, drew a bold black arrow on the right thigh, his initials beside it. We repeated it aloud for the record. Right leg confirmed. Timeout complete. Induction smooth. Propol fentanyl. Airway secured. Vitals perfect. I prepped both legs as we always do. Scrubbed from groin to ankle. Painted them orange with betadine. Drapes went up. Everything looked exactly how it should until I rolled the sterile sheet back to confirm the site before incision. The mark was gone. Not smeared, not faded, just gone. The skin looked freshly prepped, uniform, no trace of ink. I leaned closer, thinking maybe the antiseptic lifted the pigment, but it wasn't there. The drape line was clean, no sign anything had been wiped. Then I noticed the left leg, a faint outline like a shadow of writing that didn't belong there. The suggestion of an arrow pointing the wrong way. I felt the air go still. "Doctor," I said quietly, "the mark's missing." He frowned, leaned over, looked for himself. For the first time that night, he didn't have an answer. We paused everything. "New timeout," I called. Everyone repeated the verification. Chart right leg, consent right leg, site verification right leg. Everything said right, and yet my stomach wouldn't unclench. The surgeon remarked the leg, darker this time, almost pressing the ink into the skin. He even traced a second arrow, overkill, but understandable. We proceeded. As the first incision was drawn, the lights flickered. A quick strobe of white across the drapes, then again, brighter. For a second, every metal surface in the O flashed silver. The left leg glowed just for a heartbeat, as though static electricity ran along it. Everyone stopped. The anesthetist glanced up. Power flickers happen, but not like that. No alarms, no generator switch, no outage elsewhere. Just the left leg lit up in an electric shimmer, then back to nothing. The surgeon hesitated only a moment before continuing. Professional instinct. 15 minutes later, the patient's rhythm changed. Blood pressure dropped, then crashed. We worked fast. Fluids, epicompressions, no bleeding in the field, no visible cause, but his heart rate wouldn't climb. We coded for 20 minutes. Nothing. Flatline. Time of death 22:04. The surgeon sat back, defeated. I remember glancing at the right leg, our incision line still clean, grafted in place. Then my eyes moved to the left. No one had touched it. And yet a thin white scar traced the same pattern as the incision on the right. Not deep, not fresh, just there, a mirror image. I didn't say a word. Neither did anyone else. The report listed cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest of unknown origin. The documentation ended with procedure verified, correct site confirmed, but my hand shook while typing those words. 2 weeks later, I found out something the family hadn't mentioned during pre-op. He had an identical twin brother. 5 years earlier, that brother had died in the same O. Same surgeon, same anesthetist, same procedure, wrong side surgery, left instead of right. He'd bled out on the table before the graft could even take. I checked the archived case file myself. The notes, the photo of the mark, the post-op report, left leg. I stared at that file so long the fluorescent light above me flickered like it was struggling to stay awake. The mark that vanished. The flash of light on the left leg. The sudden, untraceable code. It all fit in a way I wish it didn't. Maybe we didn't lose a patient that night. Maybe two brothers finally ended up on the same side. Since that day, I mark both limbs before every procedure. Always. Even when the consent is clear. Even when everyone rolls their eyes. Especially then. Because sometimes it's not about getting it right. It's about making sure nothing else tries to correct you. Every instrument in an operating room is accounted for. It's not superstition. It's survival. Metal in, metal out. Every clamp, every needle, every sponge. The first thing they teach you, a bad count can ruin a career. The second thing you learn, sometimes a bad count ruins your sleep. That case was supposed to be routine. A midline laparotomy for bowel obstruction. Late evening, tired staff but still sharp. Start count 23 instruments. All read aloud. all logged. Halfway through, another verification. 23. Perfect. Then closure. The scrub tech read the final count, 22. We all froze. The surgeon looked up, waiting for a correction. None came. She counted again, hands shaking this time. Still 22. We tore the room apart. Field empty. Drapes lifted. Kick buckets overturned. Floor inspected. Instrument trays searched with a flashlight. Nothing. The missing tool, a number 10 scalpel handle, heavy stainless steel. Hard to miss. The surgeon glared at the incision like it had betrayed him. X-ray. He said, "We rolled the C-arm in, image taken, no foreign body. Still, the number didn't change. 22. We had to close. Policy says if imaging is clear, you proceed." So we did. I filled out the incident report myself, every detail exact. Instrument count discrepancy. X-ray negative. Item logged as missing. Chain of custody complete. The surgeon left without a word. I stayed behind to help clean the room. When the lights dimmed for terminal wipe down, the sound of metal on metal echoed once, soft, distant. I told myself it was the autoclave cycling in Central Sterile. 2 weeks later, I was back in the same O, different case, same surgeon. When I opened the new sterile tray, I felt it before I saw it. The wrong weight in the instrument pack. The tray was heavier. I peeled back the sterile wrap layer by layer. Forceps, scissors, retractors, and then there it was. A scalpel handle, not new, rusted at the neck. The number 10 blade mount discolored, etched with faint orange streaks and attached through its finger hole, a red paper tag. I picked it up with trembling hands. The writing on the tag was faded, smudged by moisture, but legible. The old case number, the one from the missing count. The tech behind me went pale. "This isn't from today's tray," she whispered. Central Supply confirmed it. That specific handle had been logged as destroyed, melted down, scrapped after being reported missing. I showed the O supervisor. She sealed it in a biohazard bag, logged it for investigation. We filed another report. A week later, it disappeared again from the supervisor's locked drawer. No entry key used, no camera footage, no trace. The official conclusion: clerical duplication error. Their explanation: 2 instruments must have shared a similar serial number. But I know the way instruments age. This one had been somewhere wet. Somewhere time didn't follow sterilization schedules. For months, I avoided that O. When I finally rotated back, I swore I could hear the faint scrape of metal whenever the air conditioner cycled on, like a blade dragging along the tray lip. Once during setup, I reached for a retractor and felt something sharp against my glove. When I turned it over, a thin line of rust smeared the latex. The handle wasn't in the tray list that day either. I reported it again. No one found anything. Central Sterile joked that I was haunted by a scalpel. Maybe they were right, but I've come to think the O never lost it. It just keeps it somewhere, else until it's ready to come back. Now before every closure, I count twice, then once more after the surgeon leaves. Sometimes the count ends perfect. Sometimes when the lights dim, I could swear I see an extra glint on the table, gone before I can mark it down. We started that night with 23 instruments. We ended with 22. And I still can't decide if the missing one stayed behind or if it followed me home. Thank you all for joining me on these journeys. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or gave you chills, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting stories. Have you ever experienced something similar? Or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video if you dare.